You are watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another movie review. Today's video was again requested by Rabid Waffles, and as usual, his links will be in the end screen and description. Today I'll be removing the Stanley Kubrick film, A Clockwork Orange, based on the novel by Anthony Burgess of the same name. I'm gonna do different segments of this review just to kind of make sure I cover everything that I think is worth covering. Let's start with the plot. It's a 2-hour movie, so obviously I'm not gonna have the whole plot mentioned in this video, but there are bound to be some major spoilers. I will give away quite a bit of things. I will leave a few things out just to make it so you still have a reason to watch the movie even if you watch this, but if you don't want any spoilers, I advise you watch it and come back. A Clockwork Orange is a movie about a guy named Alex DeLarge and his gang of misfits who like to go around, beat people up, and rape people and steal shit. They're not exactly the greatest of people towards the start of the film. Alex is sort of the fearless leader of his group of friends, which he calls his droogs, which we'll get into that a little bit later. However, his friends start to get fed up with the way he treats them, and eventually they leave him to get arrested. They set him up so that he gets left behind and the cops come and pick him up. So Alex gets arrested for murder because he hits this lady on the head with this giant porcelain dick. He gets a 14-year prison sentence, but after 2 years in prison, he's actually accepted into a program that allows him to shorten his sentence. Basically, he would only have a remaining 2 weeks, but he would have to undergo treatment to get rid of his psychotic tendencies. So he goes through the treatment, which is a combination of drugs and hypnosis, to make him not want to do bad things out of fear. Basically, they condition him to get sick anytime he has an evil thought. And he's released back into the world. Once he's released back into the world, he encounters a homeless guy he had previously beat up in the beginning of the film. This is shortly after his parents basically kick him out because he was gone and they didn't know he was coming back and they realized he was trouble, so they basically wouldn't let him come back home. So anyway, he encounters this homeless guy who recognizes him and gets himself and a group of other homeless guys to start beating on him. At which point the police intervene, but lo and behold, the police are actually his 2 former droogs, 2 of the guys who left him for dead. And so they beat him up and try to drown him and just leave him out in the woods to basically die. He then wanders around until he comes across the house of an old man who is now crippled. It turns out Alex is the one who crippled him because of a scene earlier. They also raped this guy's wife and she died later on and he blames them for that, but he doesn't recognize Alex right away. And seeing the horrible condition Alex is in, the man decides to take him in. Of course, when Alex is taking a bath at the man's house, he stupidly sings Singing in the Rain, which is the same song he sang as he raped the guy's wife and beat him. So the man realizes who Alex is and is determined to kill him now. Of course, he doesn't let Alex know he knows who he is, and he decides to lie to him and say he's going to help him and have the government help him to overcome his thing or show how bad it is the treatment was. Basically, he tells Alex he wants to show him how cruel this treatment is so that they can get the government in trouble for it. And of course, Alex lets it slip that he can no longer hear Ludwig van Beethoven without getting sick, because that was also part of the conditioning. So the man, of course, drugs Alex and locks him in a room and plays Ludwig van Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and makes him very, very sick, to the point that Alex decides he wants to snuff it. So he tries to jump from the window, but he does not die. Instead, he is wounded and wakes up in the hospital. He is then greeted by a government official who wants to help Alex, wants to help him get better, on the condition that he will help give them a better reputation, and basically refute any evidence that the treatment they did to him was cruel. Alex agrees, and in the final scene of the movie, he has a thought of sex and Ludwig van Beethoven, which were 2 things that thinking about would have previously made him sick. So it shows that the treatment no longer affects him, and the film ends with him saying, "I was cured all right." Now, it's worth mentioning that the book actually has a chapter after that, which he actually does redeem himself in the end on his own volition, because he decides he'd like to see what having a family of his own would be like. I've never actually read the book, but this is what I've been told. Some people say that the book's ending is actually not as good, and part of the reason it wasn't included in the film is because it was actually omitted from the American release of the book for many years, because they didn't think the whole him just suddenly turning good at the very end made any sense. And as it stands, I'm happy with the movie kind of ending at the point it does. But I would have liked to see that redemptive chapter put into play, at least as an extra or something like that. This is one of my all-time favorite films, and once I finish making my video about my top 10 favorite films, it is on there at one point. This is by far my favorite Stanley Kubrick film, and something I gotta mention about it is people try to say this is one of the most graphic movies of all time, and I really don't think that's true at all. Yes, it's very graphic, has a lot of nudity, a lot of violence, and a lot of rape, but it's not inordinately gory, and I don't know, I think people hype up the ultra-violence a lot about it, and they hype up a lot of the other stuff. While it's true, some of the visuals and audio and shit that they do show is kind of fucked up. Anyone who considers this to be the worst movie, as in worst as in most immoral, has never seen a Serbian film. A Serbian film makes A Clockwork Orange look like Barney the dinosaur. Nevertheless, A Clockwork Orange is a masterpiece, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you do. The way it's constructed, the atmosphere, the way the character talks is completely unique. He uses a fictional dialect known as Nadsat, which is why he refers to his friends as droogs, and why he says horror show instead of good, and why he calls jail statja. Stuff like that. When Anthony Burgess wrote the book A Clockwork Orange, he decided that using modern slang would make the book feel dated very quickly. So he created his own slang, nadsat, which is why Alex talks so peculiarly. I actually quite like the way he talks. It's very entertaining. If nadsat was what slang was today, it would mean people were a lot more well-spoken. Now to the final part of the review, I'm just going to mention a few little tidbits of stuff that I just realized after watching Clockwork Orange. So I've seen Clockwork Orange twice now, but the first time I saw it, which I believe was last year. I actually recently rewatched it yesterday in preparation for this review. There are many references and different things that I didn't originally realize were from A Clockwork Orange. For instance, the intro to Conker's Bad Fur Day is basically a shot-for-shot remake of the intro to Clockwork Orange, with differences, obviously. For instance, the dialogue is almost entirely different, and the surroundings around Conker are completely different as well. But the music is the same, the choreography is the same, all right down to the part where Conker's drinking the milk is the same. There's also a scene in South Park during the Coon saga, during Coon 2 Hindsight, where Cartman starts beating up on Clyde, or Mosquito as he is in that episode. And that scene is very, very reminiscent to the scene where Alex beats the fuck out of his droogs. So with that being said, Clockwork Orange is definitely a very influential film. It's considered to be one of the greatest films of all time, and it's very warranted. And even though Alex is one of the most fucked up protagonists I've ever seen, you actually start to feel for him when he starts going through all the horrible shit towards the end. But if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange, I definitely recommend you check it out. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye, and you have a great rest of the day.